Well, newly released travel data suggests Canadians are still staying away from the U.S., with Donald Trump's trade war leaving many of them making alternative travel plans.
New numbers from Statistics Canada show Canadians continue to shun travel to the United States. The data shows 1.4 million Canadians made return trips from the U.S. by car in October. That's a drop of more than 30% from the same time last year. And the number of Canadians making return trips by air from the U.S. last month was about 437,000. That's down nearly 24% from a year ago.
There's a new kind of protest unfolding in Canada, one without signs, slogans, or marches. It's quiet, it's subtle, but it's powerful, because millions of Canadians are taking a stand in a way they never have before, by simply staying home. According to new data from Statistics Canada, travel to the United States has plummeted, down more than 30% by land and nearly 25% by air. That's millions of fewer border crossings, billions in lost revenue for American towns that once depended on Canadian visitors. But this isn't just about canceled vacations or empty shopping carts. It's about something much deeper: identity. Without even realizing it, Canadians are sending a message, loud and clear, the same message Prime Minister Mark Carney has been building for months. Canada doesn't need to depend on America anymore.
Take us through this latest report from Statistics Canada.
Yeah, so what we're really seeing is that Canadians are not visiting the United States as often as they used to. So this latest report from Statistics Canada released this morning says that the number of return trips among Canadians traveling to the U.S. in October dropped by nearly 24% for air travel and then more than 30% for land travel. That's compared to the same time last year. And we've really been seeing this decline since early this year. This, of course, tied to the souring relationship with the United States because U.S. President Donald Trump launched a trade war, has also been referring to Canada as the 51st state, which has really left a bad taste in people's mouths. We've heard from Canadians who are boycotting travel to the U.S., and that's really costing the United States. When we look at a recent U.S. Travel Association report, it estimates this year America will see a 6.3% drop in international visits and a 3.2% decline in international tourism spending. That's a loss of $5.7 billion compared to last year, and this is largely being driven by fewer Canadians.
When reporters asked why cross-border travel is collapsing, the answer was both simple and deeply uncomfortable for the White House. Canadians are voting with their wallets. In the past year alone, trips to the United States have dropped by double digits, while travel to Europe, Asia, and destinations within Canada has surged. For the first time in modern history, border cities like Detroit, Buffalo, and Seattle are sounding the alarm. Restaurants are quieter. Hotels are cutting staff. Local economies that once relied on a steady flow of Canadian visitors are beginning to crack. One travel analyst put it bluntly: this isn't a temporary dip, it's a change in sentiment. And that sentiment is crystal clear. Canadians are done supporting Trump's America.
So as we were just hearing there, with losses potentially in the billions for the U.S. tourism industry, how are businesses south of the border that rely on Canadian tourists, how are they managing?
Well, we're hearing from those closest to the Canadian border that they really are hurting, and they're trying to entice Canadian customers. We know that tourism organizations in Seattle, in Buffalo, and upstate New York, they've actually got promos and discounts going for Canadians. And right here in Windsor, where people say that Detroit really feels like an extension of this city, we know that people aren't visiting as often as they used to. One restaurant in Detroit was saying that the lack of Canadian visitors is hurting their bottom line.
Absolutely, you do see a loss, but and hopefully they come back, and that's our goal, is to get everyone back and let everybody know that they're welcome here.
It started with the tariffs: steel, aluminum, lumber, auto parts. When Donald Trump launched his so-called America First policy, he didn't just confront China, he turned his fire on Canada. His trade war didn't just strike at Canadian businesses, it struck at Canadian pride. The 51st state jokes, the name-calling, the tariffs disguised as national security, every move left a mark. It built a quiet resentment that no apology, no PR campaign could ever erase. And now the consequences are finally here. America's tourism industry is bleeding billions, not because of protests or politics, but because of a quiet, grassroots boycott. Millions of Canadians simply decided, we're done. No hashtags, no slogans, no speeches, just silence and absence. Washington may downplay it, but the numbers tell the story. The boycott is real, and it's growing.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. So here we are. I mean, this has been happening for month after month after month, ever since Donald Trump made his 51st state annexation threats and the tariffs. How has your business been directly impacted by clients avoiding travel to the U.S.?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Andrew. It is certainly something that, any of the travel agencies that really focus in on southern destinations within the U.S. are seeing a huge decline. We are seeing lots of people that are now wanting to, take their families to Caribbean cruises, perhaps going to all-inclusive resorts in the Caribbean, to Mexico. And a lot of those places do have quite a lot to offer. We're also seeing families that have sort of their preteen, teenagers that are actually starting to look at, instead of traveling over the winter months, going away in the summer and doing trips to Europe, whether that's a Mediterranean cruise or doing land tours through places like Italy and Ireland.
There's a new kind of movement rising in Canada, quiet, steady, and unstoppable. It doesn't march in the streets or wave flags. It moves through choices, millions of them. Because Canadians aren't canceling vacations, they're redirecting them from Florida to Whistler, from Los Angeles to Vancouver Island, from New York to Montreal. Domestic tourism in Canada has exploded, injecting billions into local economies that once competed with U.S. destinations. Hotels, restaurants, and cultural events across the country are thriving like never before. And that's no coincidence. It's Mark Carney's Support Canadian policy taking root, an idea he's championed since his first day in office. He said it best, "Every dollar you spend at home builds our future." What began as frustration with Trump's tariffs has evolved into something deeper: pride. Pride in Canadian products, pride in Canadian jobs, pride in choosing Canada. Across the border, the effects are impossible to ignore. Hotels in upstate New York are slashing prices by 40%. Shopping malls in Buffalo are cutting hours. Gas stations near the border are closing their doors. Even the once crowded border crossings now stand eerily quiet. U.S. tourism boards are spending millions on ad campaigns, discounts, perks, desperate slogans begging Canadians to return. But Canadians aren't buying it, because this isn't about money anymore. It's about emotion. They simply don't feel welcome in Trump's America, and that's a wound no sale can heal. While the U.S. scrambles to win them back, Carney's government is quietly turning that sentiment into strategy. The Buy Canadian Act and the Build at Home initiatives are reinforcing the same mindset, turning frustration into economic resilience. From steel to tourism, Carney's goal has never changed: to make Canada self-sufficient, to make it proud, to make it untouchable. And now it's happening naturally, organically, without trade wars or political drama. Canadians are isolating Trump without even trying. His tariffs, his insults, his so-called nationalism, they didn't weaken Canada. They woke it up. Every dollar Canadians don't spend in the U.S. is being reinvested into their own backyard, fueling Canadian airlines, hotels, small businesses, and industries. New flight routes are opening across the Rockies. Towns like Kelowna and St. John's are booming. This isn't a protest. It's a renaissance, a rebirth of Canadian confidence. Because when Canadians choose to travel within their own borders, they aren't just boosting the economy, they're declaring independence. This quiet boycott of U.S. travel has become one of the most successful grassroots economic movements in modern history. Silent, organic, unstoppable. This is what Mark Carney meant when he said Canada must define itself by choice, not comparison. The Canada of today doesn't measure success by how close it stands to America, but by how far it's come on its own. Every skipped trip to Miami, every dollar spent in Halifax instead of Honolulu, every Canadian choosing Canada over the U.S., it's all part of the same message. We're not leaving America behind in anger. We're outgrowing it. What began as retaliation has become revelation. Trump wanted America to stand alone, and ironically, he got what he wanted, because now Canada stands alone too. Independent, strong, confident. The boycott isn't about hostility, it's about maturity. A quiet statement that Canada no longer follows, it leads. And that's exactly what Carney envisioned all along. A Canada that thrives not because of America, but despite it. This is Canada Newsline, where independence finally has a voice.